Hey guys, welcome to Political Fight Club. I'm Robert Durden. In this episode, we're going to be talking about all of the fuckery going on in the Democratic Party right now. I have 4 different stories we're going to talk about. One of them's not really part of the party. It's just kind of like neo-lib news, and I have a joke to make about it. So we're going to talk about Brian Williams leaving MSNBC. We're also going to talk about Bernie and Joe Manchin and what they're trying to do with the Build Back Better Act now that it's in the Senate, what they're kind of trying to draw lines on, and what we can expect from both Bernie and Manchin. And spoiler alert, everything that Bernie's fighting for, he ain't going to get. Because Manchin has already proven that he's willing to draw a line in the sand, and Bernie's already proven that he's willing to just give away the farm for nothing. So I'm also going to talk about what I think Bernie should do. Like, if I'm in his shoes, I'll tell you what I would do. And then we're also going to talk about how AOC is now starting to change her rhetoric, and she's preparing for a Democratic bloodbath in the midterms, and she's already planning on pushing blame for when the Build Back Better Act gets cut down to nothing onto centrist Democrats instead of taking any responsibility herself, instead of allowing the squad to take any heat for it. So we're going to talk about a lot. Let's start with Brian Williams. He said on November 10th that he is now going to be out at MSNBC at the end of the year. So if you don't know Brian Williams, he's like the quintessential automaton, like MSNBC host. He like looks the part. He looks like he was genetically engineered in a basement to like be, on one of these mainstream media channels. He's got the voice. So you guys know who he is. He's out now. That is very good news for Cenk Uygur and Anna Kasparian. I know they've probably already sent in their resumes. They're just sitting around, waiting around. And don't worry, guys. It's not a big deal if you don't get the Brian Williams job. Word on the street is Rachel Maddow is also out at the end of next year. Now, that hasn't been confirmed yet, as far as I know, but I've seen, they say, sources close to her saying that she's out at the end of next year. So you guys will get another chance at that seat. And like I've said, all Anna would have to do to get that seat is just cut her hair. She's essentially like Rachel Maddow's doppelganger, other than her hairstyle. And I mean, technically, I guess you could probably put Sam Cedar in there too, because he's like Rachel Maddow's actual doppelganger as well. Anyway, I digress. Good news for Cenk and Anna. Brian Williams is going to be out at MSNBC. Now let's talk about Joe Manchin, Bernie. And also, I should mention this in passing. This doesn't have anything to do with anything, but the Democrats are kind of testing the waters right now on whether or not it would be best to run Kamala, Pete Buttigieg, or Biden. And they kind of like planted some stories that they were thinking of running Kamala and Pete just to see what happened. And the results that came back from the general populace were not good. Like, generally, everybody hates those two. And, of course, Kamala Harris has like a 28% favorability or 28% approval rating right now. That's historically low. Like, we're talking about, like, Dick Cheney numbers at this point. So it doesn't look good for what I think they want to do as priority is if they can run Kamala. But it doesn't look good. So what they've done now is that, according to the Wall Street Journal, sources close to Biden said that he is definitely going to try to run in 2024. And I retweeted that. Now, is there a better way to reelect Trump than to run Biden out there right now? Even if he were a good president, meaning even if he were like well-intentioned, he is brain dead. Brain dead. Trump is going to eat him alive. Are you out of your fucking minds? Is there any better way to usher fascism into this country than to run Joe Biden again? Are you out of your fucking minds? Joe Biden is the luckiest ever to have just beaten him the last time. If COVID hadn't just hit, Trump would have killed Biden. And with the way that the Democrats are operating right now, there's 0% chance that Biden wins that. So the Democratic Party, they're in la-la land. They're setting up the Republicans to not only win easily in the midterms, but also handily win and probably get Trump reelected in 2024. But let's go back to the actual news here, guys. Manchin versus Bernie. What is in this $1.75 trillion bill or $1.7 trillion bill that just went to the Senate? There's really only a couple of good things left. There is the universal child care and the child tax credit extended for 1 year. And then hearing is added to Medicare. Now, what Bernie has said that he's going to do a hard line on now, or he's not going to cross the threshold on, which he fucking will, but he's saying that he won't, is that he's not going to allow the SALT tax deduction, the cap that I was talking about in a previous episode, that's a huge tax giveaway to the millionaires and billionaires to the tune of like $280 billion. He says, I'm not going to allow that in the bill. He also wants to get dental added to Medicare. Those are the two things that Bernie has said, at least as far as I've seen. Manchin, on the other hand, hasn't been quite as specific, although it looks like, obviously paid family leave is gone. He's going to chop environmental protections and all the climate change provisions out of the bill, without a doubt. That's $555 billion that Manchin could just whittle down to almost nothing. And I don't see him allowing... he's definitely going to be a hard yes on the giveaway to the millionaires and billionaires via the SALT tax. So... the SALT tax deduction is probably going to stay in there, and I don't think Bernie will get dental in there either. I think that he'll give in on both. So it's very sad, but I happen to be right on this all the time because I really don't have much faith in Bernie because he's not given me any reason to give him any faith. What has he fought for? This bill used to be like $8 trillion. Then it was down to $6 trillion, and that was when they really ran with it. He was like, I'm running with a $6 trillion bill. It's going to be great. And then right after that, Joe Manchin came out and said $1 trillion was all he was willing to do. So, got Bernie at $6 trillion here, Manchin at $1 trillion here. The way that I guessed it was going to be about $1.8 trillion, which is pretty close to what it actually is I go, Bernie's going to give this much, and Manchin's going to give this much. That's how it's going to be in this as well. I imagine that what will probably happen is that Manchin will whittle a bunch of environmental stuff out of there. The SALT cap tax deduction thing that gives all of that extra money to the elitists, that'll probably stay in there. The best we can hope for is that dental gets added to Medicare. Do I think that's going to happen? No. I don't think that Manchin's going to give on anything, basically. So I think that Bernie's going to give 90%, maybe Manchin gives 10%, and then this bill ends up at like $1.4 trillion, and we're in for an absolute bloodbath in the midterms after that happens. Now, what do I think Bernie should do? I think that now that it's in the Senate, Bernie can play the same game that Manchin has this entire time, which is his vote can break this. And he can say to Joe Biden, if he had brass balls, and this is what, I hope anybody that even gives a shit about, when you run on not me, us, or fight for someone that you don't know, I would hope that the guy that came up with those things would actually fight for people he doesn't know that aren't elitists and just say, listen, we're not giving this tax break to billionaires. That's going to be out of there. And instead, I'll do you one better. It's going to be $2 trillion, and we're going to add free community college in there. Otherwise, I shoot it down. And if you guys don't like it, I'm going to go out there and just explain to people, look, I'm not giving billionaires $285 billion. I'd rather spend $285 billion to make sure that we get free community college, because that's about what it would cost. A little more than that, like $300 billion over 10 years instead of $285 over 10 years. So essentially, you just say, nope, we are not giving you guys this tax break. Instead, we're going to take the money from those SALT tax deductions from these elitists, and we're going to pay for free community college, period. That's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to go out there and run a PR campaign against anybody that's against this idea. And if you guys don't do this, I'm going to shoot the bill down, and I'll just take the flack from the mainstream media and remind everybody that the only reason I voted it down was because you guys would not allow millionaires and billionaires to pay for free community college in this country. And I'm just going to keep battering you guys with it. And everybody's going to agree with me. That's what Bernie would do if he actually had some balls. But he doesn't. He's Cuckosaurus Rex. He is King Cuck. So the other thing he could do is he could also extract an executive order or two out of Biden, which is what the House squad should have done but didn't do. He could say, listen, Joe, you're going to get killed in the midterms with this bill, especially if you let it get whittled down to nothing with Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema. So I will pass it even if they take all that stuff out of there. But here's the deal. You're going to give everybody Medicare for all via the Social Security Act, Section 1881 Alpha. You're going to do that. You're going to forgive all student loans, and you're going to forgive all tuition. You're going to pardon all of the whistleblowers, which you can do via executive order. And, there's other things you can do. You can change the poverty line in terms of the way it's calculated in this country. Lee Camp wrote about this. You can do that via executive order. That way a lot more people, if you change the poverty line from like 26,000 to like 45,000, then a lot more people qualify for benefits. So that's something you can do via executive order. There's a whole bunch of other things that you could do. Legalize marijuana. and release all nonviolent drug offenders. You can do a lot of things via executive order. Bernie just has to pick a handful of them and go, listen, I'll vote for this only under the condition that you do 1 or 2 or 3 of these things. And just don't budge on those things. Fight for them. Let the public know that's what you're fighting for, and they'll get behind you. Is Bernie going to do that? 0% chance. 0% chance. So that's what Bernie could do. He has leverage right now. He has about the same leverage as Manchin does. The problem is that everybody knows that Manchin is willing to shoot the hostage if it comes down to it, whereas they know now that Bernie's not going to do that. And they also now know, obviously, that the House isn't going to do it because they just they unlinked the bills. They gave away all their leverage. So they know the House Democrats and the House progressives, the squad, aren't going to shoot the hostage, and they know that Bernie isn't either, so they just call his bluff. So that's why I don't think he's going to get anything done. They know he's a wimp. So last thing here, AOC has now come out this morning, and she's using language that seems to indicate that she understands that this bill is going to get them killed in the midterms. And if you notice the way that she's speaking here, guys, she wants it to seem like it has nothing to do with her and the squad. Like they had no part to play in this bill ending up the way that it did. I'm going to read to you here exactly what she said, okay? I think that if we pass the Build Back Better Act as the House passed it, we have a shot to go back to our communities and say we delivered. But that's not to say that this process hasn't been demoralizing for a lot of folks, because there were enormous promises made, not just at the beginning and not just during the election, but that continued to be made. This is where I sounded the alarm, because what really dampens turnout is when Democrats make promises that they do not keep. As if AOC has ever kept a promise that she's ever made, or pushed Joe Biden to keep any of the promises that he's ever made. So she's trying to make it look like, oh, well, this is really the centrist Democrats and Joe Biden making promises that they can't keep. But she fails to tell you that she's enabling Joe Biden and Joe Manchin by not doing anything and not pushing them and not pressuring them publicly to break all of the Democrats' promises. So she's like, no, it's going to be the centrists' fault when we lose in the midterms. It's going to be a repressed turnout because they suck. Yeah, they do suck, AOC, but you suck just as bad. You have 13 million Twitter followers. If you wanted to push them to do some things and get some protests going, you fucking could. But she doesn't want to take any responsibility, and you can already see all of the squad doing this exact thing where they don't want to take any responsibility. But if you go back and look at my videos, I've cataloged where they have flubbed this time and time again. I mean, they fumbled this worse than Ryan Grimm with a football reference. So it's not looking good. They are going to get killed in the midterms. Even if this bill passes the way that it is, which it's impossible. Manchin is not going to allow that. It's going to get whittled down or it's going to die entirely. It's going to be a bloodbath in the midterms, and AOC doesn't want to take any responsibility for the bill going down, and she doesn't want to take any responsibility for them getting killed in the midterms, which it absolutely is. So it's not the worst thing in the world. The Democrats haven't done anything. They deserve to lose. They deserve to be humiliated. And for people like me, I'll be laughing all the way to the bank. Not because I want Republicans to win, but because it just proves further that any of those vote blue no matter who and the vote Joe in and then push him left crowd are fucking morons. There couldn't be more evidence that those people are idiots at this point. If you still believe that we can push Joe Biden left or reform the Democratic Party, I'm sorry, but you're out of your mind. You're out of your mind at this point. How much more evidence do you need? You are just as drunk on the Kool-Aid as Trumpists are. You just happen to be cheering for the other side. So just stop it. AOC is going to try to skirt responsibility for this. Don't let her do that. Remember exactly what they were doing for the last year when they had a lot of power, and they didn't use it. And they're going to try to pretend like they had nothing to do with this dropping from $6 trillion down to $1.5 trillion or whatever it ends up being at. And by the way, they don't hate this bill as much as they seem to, or like rhetorically they're talking about, because Ilhan Omar just danced with that fucking cartoon bill on the steps of Congress like a Schoolhouse Rock episode from hell. And it's just like, yeah, that tells me everything I need to know. They're just fine with this shitty bill exactly the way it is, and it's horrible. It's horrible even before Manchin gets his hands on it. So anyway, keep fighting the good fight out there, guys. I'm going to go hang out. As you might hear, my mom's here playing with my daughter, and they're playing with the dog. So I'm going to go hang out with fam for a little bit. I have 3 more episodes written, including 1 more roast. So you might want to check that out. It'll be out in a few days. I love you guys. Keep fighting the good fight. Talk to you later.